There comes a moment in life when you quietly realize something strange about the human mind. Even when things are going well, even when others appreciate you, a small voice inside still asks, "Am I really enough?" Many people carry this question silently for years. They try to answer it by achieving more, improving themselves, or seeking approval from the world around them. Yet no matter how much they accomplish, the feeling never fully disappears. In Buddhist philosophy, this inner struggle is not a personal failure, it is simply the mind searching for worth in the wrong place. The Buddha taught that suffering often begins when we build our identity on things that constantly change: opinions, success, status, or comparison with others. When your value depends on these unstable conditions, your peace becomes fragile. One moment you feel confident, and the next moment doubt returns. So the mind keeps chasing validation, hoping that one more achievement or one more compliment will finally bring lasting self-acceptance. But Buddhist wisdom gently reveals something surprising. The problem was never that you lacked worth. The problem is that you were taught to measure yourself through the eyes of the world instead of through awareness of your own true nature. And when this realization begins to unfold, something quietly shifts inside you. Instead of fighting yourself, you start observing your thoughts with compassion. Instead of constantly trying to become someone else, you begin to understand the person you already are. In Buddhism, this is where true transformation begins, not through perfection, but through awareness. In this video, we will explore 7 powerful insights that help you reconnect with the quiet dignity that has always existed within you. Because the moment you stop searching outside for your value is the moment you begin discovering the peace that was always waiting inside. Lesson 1. Stop trying to earn your worth. Many people live with an invisible belief that their worth must be earned. They tell themselves that self-respect will come later, after they achieve more, after they become more successful, or after the world begins to admire them. So life slowly becomes a long attempt to prove something. Work harder, become better, impress more people, and maybe then the feeling of being enough will finally appear. But the strange truth is that even when those goals are reached, the feeling rarely stays. The mind quickly creates another condition, another standard, another mountain to climb. In this quiet way, a person can spend an entire lifetime chasing a sense of worth that always seems to remain just beyond reach. Buddhist philosophy gently reveals why this happens. When your value depends on external results, your peace becomes tied to things that constantly change. Success rises and falls. Praise appears and disappears. Opinions shift like weather. If your self-worth is built on these unstable foundations, your inner stability will always feel uncertain. The Buddha observed that much of human suffering comes from clinging to conditions outside our control. The mind believes it must earn approval, earn success, and earn love before it can finally rest. Yet this belief itself is the source of the struggle. True self-love begins with a very different realization. Your worth is not something that arrives after achievement. It is something that was already present before any achievement ever happened. You did not need to prove your value as a child in order to deserve kindness, and the same truth remains now. When you stop measuring yourself by outcomes and begin recognizing your inherent dignity as a human being, a quiet freedom begins to emerge. The constant pressure to prove yourself slowly fades. This does not mean you stop growing or pursuing meaningful goals. Buddhism never teaches passivity. Instead, it invites you to act from a place of wholeness rather than from a feeling of lack. When you no longer believe that success is required to justify your existence, your actions become lighter and more authentic. You work, create, and contribute not because you are trying to earn your worth, but because you are already complete. And in that realization, the exhausting race for validation finally begins to lose its power. Lesson 2. The mind becomes what it repeats. Your relationship with yourself is not created in dramatic moments of success or failure. It is quietly formed in the small conversations that happen inside your mind every single day. Most people rarely notice these inner dialogues, yet they shape the way we see ourselves and the world around us. A thought appears saying, "You should be better," "You are not doing enough," or "You always fall short." At first it may seem like a passing idea, something small and insignificant. But when these thoughts repeat again and again, they begin to carve deep pathways in the mind. Buddhist teachings often describe the mind as fertile soil. Whatever is planted there repeatedly will eventually grow. If seeds of doubt are planted every day, doubt becomes the natural state of the mind. If criticism is repeated often enough, the mind begins to believe it as truth. Over time, a person may start identifying with these thoughts, believing that the voice of judgment inside their head represents who they truly are. But this is where awareness becomes powerful. Buddhism teaches that thoughts are not permanent truths. They are simply mental events that arise, stay for a moment, and then pass away. The problem begins when we stop observing these thoughts and start believing them automatically. The mind says, "You are not good enough," and instead of questioning it, you accept it. It says you failed again, and instead of responding with understanding, you repeat the message until it feels like part of your identity. But when mindfulness begins to develop, something important changes. You start noticing the voice inside your mind as if you are watching it from a small distance. You hear the criticism, but you also realize it is simply a thought appearing within awareness. This realization is the beginning of freedom. Once you understand that the voice in your head is not your true self, its power slowly weakens. You no longer treat every thought as a command or a fact. Instead, you observe it, allow it to pass, and gently guide your mind toward more compassionate understanding. Over time, the harsh inner dialogue begins to soften. And as the soil of the mind becomes filled with patience and awareness, a new relationship with yourself begins to grow. One rooted not in judgment, but in quiet acceptance. Lesson 3. Stop treating yourself like an enemy. One of the quiet tragedies of the human mind is the way people speak to themselves. Many individuals carry an inner voice that constantly judges every mistake, criticizes every weakness, and replays every failure as if punishment will somehow lead to improvement. Think about it for a moment. The same person who offers patience and kindness to friends, family, or even strangers often becomes harsh and unforgiving when facing their own imperfections. A small mistake becomes a reason for self-blame. A moment of weakness becomes proof of personal failure. Over time, this pattern turns the mind into a battlefield where a person is constantly fighting against themselves. Buddhist philosophy invites us to look at this habit with deep awareness. The Buddha taught that compassion is not something reserved only for others. It must also include the way we treat our own minds. When the mind is constantly attacked with judgment and criticism, it cannot become peaceful. Instead, it becomes tense, fearful, and defensive. Imagine carrying a wounded animal in your arms. You would not shout at it or punish it for being injured. You would hold it gently, creating a space where healing could begin. In the same way, the wounded parts of your mind are not asking to be condemned, they are asking to be understood. Every human being carries moments of regret, confusion, and emotional pain. These experiences are not signs of weakness. They are part of the shared human journey. When you approach your struggles with hostility, the pain deepens. But when you approach them with patience and understanding, something subtle begins to change. The mind slowly relaxes. Instead of hiding from its wounds, it begins to acknowledge them honestly. This shift is where real healing starts. When you stop treating yourself like an enemy, the inner conflict begins to dissolve. You no longer waste energy fighting your own thoughts and emotions. Instead, you learn to sit with them, observe them, and respond with compassion. Over time, the harsh voice inside the mind grows quieter, replaced by a calmer presence that understands your imperfections without turning them into accusations. In Buddhism, compassion is considered one of the most transformative forces in human life, and when that compassion is directed inward, it becomes a powerful step toward inner peace. The moment you stop fighting yourself is the moment healing finally finds space to begin. Lesson 4. Your pain is not your identity. One of the deepest reasons people struggle to love themselves is the quiet habit of turning past pain into personal identity. Over time, difficult experiences begin to shape the way a person describes themselves. A failure becomes more than a moment in life. It becomes a label. Someone may start thinking of themselves as the person who always fails, the person who was rejected, or the person who made too many mistakes. These stories slowly become part of the inner narrative of the mind, and once the mind begins repeating them often enough, they start to feel like permanent truth. But Buddhist wisdom invites us to question this habit with gentle awareness. The Buddha taught that everything within the mind is constantly changing. Thoughts appear and disappear. Emotions rise and fall. Even the identities we attach to ourselves are not fixed realities. They are temporary constructions created by memory and interpretation. When we forget this truth, we begin treating our past experiences as if they define our entire being. Imagine watching clouds move across the sky. Some clouds are bright and light, while others are dark and heavy. Yet no matter how intense they appear, none of them stay forever. They pass, making space for new shapes to appear. In the same way, painful experiences pass through the mind, like clouds passing through the sky of awareness. They may leave impressions and lessons, but they do not define the sky itself. The problem begins when we cling to those clouds long after they have passed. The mind replays old moments again and again, strengthening the belief that those experiences describe who we are. A past rejection becomes a permanent identity. A past mistake becomes evidence of personal inadequacy. Over time, this attachment to old pain creates a barrier between us and our ability to see ourselves clearly. Buddhist philosophy teaches that liberation begins when we learn to observe these stories without becoming trapped inside them. Your past experiences are part of your journey, but they are not the totality of your being. They are events that occurred within the flow of life, not the definition of the life itself. When you begin to see your thoughts and memories with awareness rather than attachment, their power to define you slowly weakens. This shift creates space for a new relationship with yourself. Instead of identifying with wounds, you begin understanding them as moments of learning and growth. Instead of carrying them as proof of your limitations, you recognize them as chapters in a story that is still unfolding. The mind becomes lighter when it no longer carries the weight of old labels. In Buddhist teaching, the true nature of the mind is not defined by its past conditions. Beneath the changing thoughts and emotions lies a deeper awareness that remains open, clear, and capable of renewal. When you stop defining yourself by past pain, you reconnect with that deeper space within. And in that space, a new sense of compassion and freedom begins to emerge, allowing you to see yourself not through the lens of old suffering, but through the quiet possibility of growth and understanding. Lesson 5. Presence is the beginning of self-respect. One of the quiet patterns of modern life is the constant attempt to escape from ourselves. Many people wake up and immediately fill their day with activity. Phones, messages, work, entertainment, endless thinking, endless noise. The mind moves quickly from one distraction to another, rarely pausing for even a moment of stillness. At first, this constant movement may feel productive, even necessary, but beneath all the busyness there is often an unspoken reason. When the mind stays busy enough, it never has to sit with itself. This is why so many people feel strangely uncomfortable when everything becomes quiet. The moment distractions disappear, thoughts begin to surface, worries appear, old memories return, feelings that were buried beneath activity start rising to the surface. Because of this discomfort, many people quickly search for something else to occupy their attention. Another task, another conversation, another source of noise. In this way, a person can spend years running from the very place where peace is meant to be found. Buddhist philosophy offers a different path, one that is both simple and deeply transformative. Instead of escaping the mind, the practice is to gently return to it. The Buddha taught that awareness of the present moment is the doorway to understanding ourselves. This is why one of the most powerful practices in Buddhism begins with something incredibly simple. Stop running. Sit quietly. And observe the breath. At first, this can feel surprisingly difficult. The body may feel restless. The mind may jump from thought to thought. It may even feel as though nothing peaceful exists inside at all. But this is not failure. It is simply the mind revealing the noise that has always been there. The practice is not about forcing the mind to become quiet. It is about patiently watching what appears without judgment. As this awareness deepens, something subtle begins to change. Beneath the movement of thoughts, beneath the constant flow of worries and plans, another layer of experience becomes visible. There is a quiet awareness that observes everything without being disturbed by it. This awareness has always been present, but it is often hidden behind the noise of constant thinking. When you reconnect with this deeper awareness, a new relationship with yourself begins to form. You no longer feel like a stranger to your own mind. Instead of constantly trying to escape your thoughts and emotions, you begin to understand them with patience and clarity. This is where true self-respect begins to grow. Because self-respect is not created through achievement or external validation. It begins when you are willing to sit with yourself honestly and compassionately. The more you practice presence, the more the mind learns that it does not need to run from every feeling or thought. You become more grounded, more stable, and more at ease with your own inner world. Slowly, the place that once felt uncomfortable becomes a place of refuge. In Buddhism, the breath is often described as a quiet bridge that connects us back to ourselves. Each breath reminds us that this moment is enough. And when you learn to rest your awareness in the present moment, you begin to rediscover something many people have forgotten. You were never meant to spend your life running away from yourself. You were meant to feel at home within your own mind. Lesson 6. You cannot control how everyone sees you. One of the quiet burdens many people carry throughout life is the constant effort to control how others perceive them. Without realizing it, the mind begins shaping behavior around approval. People adjust their words, their actions, even their personalities in order to be liked, respected, or accepted. They try to avoid criticism at all costs. They carefully present only the parts of themselves they believe others will admire. At first, this may seem like a normal part of social life, but over time, it becomes exhausting. Living this way slowly disconnects a person from their authentic self. The deeper problem is that the mind begins to believe that self-worth depends on how others respond. If people approve, confidence rises. If someone criticizes or misunderstands, doubt quickly appears. This creates a fragile emotional balance where inner peace constantly rises and falls according to the reactions of others. A single negative comment can overshadow many positive ones. And because human opinions are always changing, the mind becomes trapped in an endless attempt to manage something that can never truly be controlled. Buddhist philosophy offers a powerful insight that can release this burden. The Buddha observed that the opinions of others are as unpredictable, and unstable as the weather. On one day the sky is clear and calm, and the next day clouds gather without warning. In the same way, people's perceptions shift based on their moods, experiences, expectations, and personal beliefs. Some people may appreciate you deeply, others may misunderstand your intentions completely, and there will always be individuals who criticize you no matter what you do. Understanding this truth can be deeply liberating. When you realize that controlling every opinion is impossible, the need to constantly perform for others begins to lose its power. You no longer feel responsible for managing how everyone interprets your actions. Instead, your attention begins to shift towards something far more stable, the clarity of your own intentions. In Buddhist teaching, peace does not come from external approval. It comes from acting with awareness and integrity, regardless of how the world responds. When your actions are guided by honesty, compassion, and wisdom, the opinions of others become less threatening. They are simply reflections of individual perspectives rather than final judgments about your value. This does not mean you stop caring about others or become indifferent to feedback. Rather, it means you stop allowing every opinion to define your inner state. You can listen, reflect, and learn when criticism is helpful. But you no longer surrender your sense of self to the constantly changing reactions of the world. When this shift begins to take place, a great emotional weight disappears. The energy once spent trying to please everyone becomes available for something more meaningful. You can focus on living with authenticity instead of living with constant performance. Your actions begin to arise from inner understanding rather than from fear of rejection. In this way, self-love becomes quieter but stronger. It is no longer dependent on applause or agreement. Instead, it grows from a steady recognition that your worth does not fluctuate with every opinion that appears around you. And as this clarity deepens, you begin to experience a form of peace that cannot be easily shaken by praise or criticism. This is the freedom the Buddha pointed toward. Not the freedom of controlling how the world sees you, but the freedom of no longer needing to. Lesson 7. The moment you accept yourself, life feels different. Many people misunderstand what self-love truly means. In modern culture, it is often associated with confidence, pride, or believing that you are better than others. But Buddhist wisdom points to something much quieter and much deeper. True self-love is not about inflating the ego or convincing yourself that you are perfect. It is simply the absence of self-rejection. It is the moment when you stop constantly fighting against who you are. For many people, the mind operates like a strict judge. Every action is evaluated, every mistake is criticized, and every weakness becomes a reason for disappointment. The mind compares itself to others, measures success against unrealistic standards, and constantly searches for proof that it is worthy. This endless judgment creates a subtle inner tension. Even during moments of success, the mind remains restless, always asking if it is enough. But something remarkable happens when this pattern begins to soften. When you stop treating yourself like a problem that needs to be constantly fixed, the mind begins to relax. The weight of comparison slowly lifts. The need for constant validation loses its urgency. Instead of measuring your value against the achievements or opinions of others, you begin to rest in a quieter understanding of yourself. Buddhist teachings often emphasize that suffering arises not only from external difficulties, but from the resistance we create inside the mind. When the mind constantly rejects parts of itself, it becomes trapped in an internal struggle. Thoughts battle against emotions, expectations clash with reality. This inner conflict quietly drains energy and peace. But the moment self-acceptance begins, that conflict starts to dissolve. Accepting yourself does not mean ignoring areas of growth or refusing to improve. Buddhism never teaches complacency. Instead, acceptance means seeing yourself clearly without hostility. It means recognizing your strengths and your limitations with the same honest awareness. Growth becomes possible not because you are trying to escape who you are, but because you understand yourself with compassion. When this shift occurs, life begins to feel different in subtle but powerful ways. Your mind becomes lighter because it is no longer carrying the heavy burden of constant self-judgment. You move through situations with greater calm because your sense of worth is no longer being tested by every challenge. Even difficult moments become easier to face because the battle inside your mind has quieted. This is why Buddhist wisdom places such importance on inner acceptance. When the war against yourself ends, a new kind of peace appears. It is not dependent on perfection, success, or approval. It comes from recognizing that your humanity, with all its imperfections, is not something that needs to be rejected. And in that realization, life begins to unfold with a gentle ease. Problems may still appear, challenges may still arise, but they no longer define your relationship with yourself. Instead of struggling to become worthy, you begin living from the quiet understanding that you were never unworthy to begin with. Closing reflection: the day you stop fighting yourself. There will come a quiet moment in your life when something happens that once would have shaken your confidence. Perhaps someone will criticize you. Perhaps a plan you believed in will fail. Or life may unfold in a way that feels uncertain and unpredictable. In the past, moments like these may have awakened the old voice of doubt inside your mind, the voice that questioned your worth and asked whether you were good enough. But one day, something subtle will change within you. Instead of reacting with fear or self-judgment, you will pause. You will breathe. And in that pause, you will notice that the storm outside no longer creates the same storm inside your mind. The criticism will simply be a sound passing through the air. The failure will simply be an event within the flow of life. You will observe the moment with calm awareness rather than turning it into a story about your value. In that stillness, you will remember something that many people spend their entire lives forgetting. Your worth was never determined by success. It was never controlled by the approval of others. And it was never dependent on becoming perfect. Long before achievements, expectations, and comparisons shaped your identity, there was already a quiet dignity within you. That dignity has never disappeared. It was only hidden beneath layers of doubt, fear, and the belief that you had to become someone else in order to deserve your own respect. Self-love, in the language of Buddhist wisdom, is not the moment when life finally treats you exactly the way you wish. It is the moment when you stop abandoning yourself in difficult times. It is the moment when you no longer turn against your own heart whenever things go wrong. Instead of rejecting yourself when you fall short, you remain present with patience and understanding. And when this shift begins to take place, something remarkable happens. Life itself may continue to move through cycles of success and failure, joy and difficulty. But your inner relationship with yourself becomes steady. The peace you once tried to find in achievements or validation begins to arise from a deeper place within. In that quiet awareness, you realize that the place you were searching for in the world was never far away. It was not hidden in approval, success, or perfection. It was always waiting inside the stillness of your own mind, patiently reminding you that you were never meant to fight against yourself. You were meant to return to yourself with understanding, and from that understanding, a deeper peace begins to unfold.